Okay, let me go over here and see if it started live streaming. Okay, I think we're good to go. Hello, everyone. This is Dr. Roger Paul, and tonight we're going to start a new paper from the Urantia Book, paper 137, Tarrying Time in Galilee. And there's that. This starts on page 1524 of the original book, or paper 13701, and all the rest of them. All right. And hello, everybody. Welcome. So we will get right into it here, starting this new paper tonight. Tarrying Time in Galilee. You okay over there?
I'm trying to get in. Okay, thank you.
Okay, I guess I'll start out. Early on Sunday morning, February 23rd, AD 26. Excuse me, y'all. Jesus came down from the hills to rejoin John's company encamped at Pella. All that day, Jesus mingled with the multitude. He ministered to a lad who had injured himself in a fall and journeying to the nearby village of Pella to deliver the boy safely into the hands of his parents. So first thing he did is he came down like everything was normal and back to the camp, right? And this is a picture of all his journeys during this paper. Okay, y'all can look at that. It's easy. Let me move this down a bit. Okay. Diane, could you take?
Yeah, sorry. 1, choosing the first 4 apostles. During the Sabbath, two of John's leading disciples spent much time with Jesus. Of all John's followers, one named Andrew was the most profoundly impressed with Jesus. He accompanied him on the trip to Pella with the injured boy. On the way back to John's rendezvous, he asked Jesus many questions, and just before reaching their destination, the two paused for a short talk, during which Andrew said, I have observed you ever since you came to Capernaum, and I believe you are the new teacher. And though I do not understand all your teaching, I have fully made up my mind to follow you. I would sit at your feet and learn the whole truth about the new kingdom. And Jesus, with hearty assurance, welcomed Andrew as the first of his apostles, that group of 12 who were to labor with him in the work of establishing the new kingdom of God in the hearts of men.
Okay, so this was the very first apostle, Andrew, and he became the head of the apostles, right? Along with him and his brother Simon, which was later named Peter by Jesus. You'll find out in this paper tonight. But Andrew was his brother, and they all agreed that Andrew should be the head of the apostles, and then Peter was the chief preacher. All right, and here's a picture of all their doings during this period of time, and another one a little bit closer, and I'll let y'all read that at your own time. All right, so Rodney, would you take the next one?
Yeah, I should make a comment.
Go ahead.
For the Jews, like the term on the third day, which meant very soon.
Yeah. On the third, really, many times they use the word period, not day, instead of day, because
The third period.
Yeah, the third period, and they use that a lot in the book too. But it doesn't necessarily mean a whole day, right?
Yeah.
So, yeah.
But
Okay.
also, follow me means to become my student.
Yeah.
To
Mhm.
follow me. That's why many times we'll find out Jesus says, follow me.
Yeah.
Means become my student.
Kind of like follow me on YouTube, right?
For X, because you follow people on X.
Yeah. or Facebook, right? Or
Okay.
YouTube, or yeah, follow me.
Instagram.
Okay, then on the third day means in a undetermined amount of time, but a short time.
Yeah, short
Short period of time.
But it could be 3 hours, 3 days, but not weeks or months.
Yeah.
Less than 3 days.
Yeah, that's why they use period many times when they talk to a third period, because if you calculate it out, Jesus, they said it was the third day, but if it was the third day, it was barely into the third day, right?
It wasn't even.
It wasn't even the third day when he rose from the dead, if y'all
I think
can
it was
remember.
36 hours, but
Yeah, so it wasn't really the third day. It would be considered the third period, right? All right, so wanted to clarify that. And we just assume, being misinformed as we were so many years growing up from the churches and everything else, that they meant a whole entire day. But if you calculate it out, it's not. So anyway.
okay.
All right.
And Andrew was a silent observer of and sincere believer in John's work. And he had a very able and enthusiastic brother named Simon, who was one of John's foremost disciples. It would not be amiss to say that Simon was one of John's chief supporters.
So Andrew and Simon came from being John's disciples, right? So both of them came from John, which is kind of interesting. We're going to find out some more about that in a second here. Pam, would you take the next one, please?
Soon after Jesus and Andrew returned to the camp, Andrew sought out his brother Simon, and taking him aside, informed him that he had settled in his own mind that Jesus was the great teacher, and that he had pledged himself as a disciple. He went on to say that Jesus had accepted his proffer of service and suggested that he, Simon, likewise go to Jesus and offer himself for fellowship in the service of the new kingdom. Said Simon, "Ever since this man came to work in Zebedee's shop, I have believed he was sent by God. But what about John? Are we to forsake him? Is this the right thing to do?" Whereupon they agreed to go at once to consult John. John was saddened by the thought of losing two able advisors and most promising disciples, but he bravely answered their inquiry, saying, "This is but the beginning. Presently will my work end, and we shall all become his disciples." Then Andrew beckoned to Jesus to draw aside while he announced that his brother desired to join himself to the service of the new kingdom. And in welcoming Simon as his second apostle, Jesus said, "Simon, your enthusiasm is commendable, but it is dangerous to the world of the kingdom."
Or
Sorry?
The work of the kingdom.
Dangerous to the work of the kingdom. "I admonish you to become more thoughtful in your speech. I would change your name to Peter."
And from that time on, he was known as Simon Peter, or Peter. Okay, so this was the first two apostles, both being brothers, right? Andrew being the eldest and Simon being the younger. All right. Letch, would you take the next
and
one?
I think the reason he changed it to Peter as a nickname is so that Peter could be more conscious about his tongue.
Yeah, about his speech, right? Being so bold all the time, which was handy as the preacher, but could get him in trouble also, right? Yeah, like mine does many times. Okay.
Yeah, the parents of the injured lad who lived at Pella had besought Jesus to spend the night with them, to make their house his home, and he had promised. Before leaving Andrew and his brother, Jesus said, "Early on the morrow we go into Galilee."
Okay, so he's already started making his plans to start moving right around that. All right, Gary, would you take the next one, please?
After Jesus had returned to Pella for the night, and while Andrew and Simon were yet discussing the nature of their service and the establishment of the forthcoming kingdom, James and John, the sons of Zebedee, arrived upon the scene. Having just returned from their long and fruitful,
Yep.
Futile.
futile searching in the hills for Jesus, when they heard Simon Peter tell how he and his brother Andrew had become the first accepted counselors for the new kingdom, and that they were to leave with their new master on the morrow for Galilee, both James and John were sad. They had known Jesus for some time, and they loved him. They had searched for him many days in the hills, and now they returned to learn that others had been preferred before them. They inquired where Jesus had gone and made haste to find him.
So that little jealousy came in there, didn't it? Because they were not chosen as the first two. But you're going to find out that in reality, they already were the first two. All right. That's me again, isn't it? Okay. Well, that's small, isn't it? Let me throw the glasses back on here. Jesus was asleep when they reached, excuse me, y'all. Jesus was asleep when they reached his abode, but they awakened him, saying, excuse me, y'all, how is it that while we have so long lived with you, you are searching in the hills for you prefer others before us and choose Andrew and Simon as your first associates in the new kingdom? And Jesus answered them, be calm in your hearts and ask yourself, who directed you that you should search for the Son of Man when he was about his Father's business? After they had recited the details of their long search in the hills, Jesus further instructed them, you should learn to search for the secrets of the new kingdom in your hearts and not in the hills. That's what you sought was already present in your souls. You are indeed my brethren. You needed not to be received by me. Already were you one of the kingdom, and you should be of good cheer. Make ready also to go with us tomorrow into Galilee. John then made a bold ask, but Master, will James and I be associated with you in the new kingdom, even as Andrew and Simon? And Jesus laid a hand on the shoulder of each of them and said, my brother, you were already with me in the spirit of the kingdom, even before these others made requests to be received. You, my brethren, have no need to make requests for entrance into the kingdom. You have been with me in the kingdom from the beginning. Before men and others may take precedence over you, but in your heart I did also number you in the councils of the kingdom, even before you thought to make this request of me. And even so might you have been the first before men, had you not been absent, engaged in a well-intentioned but self-appointed task of seeking for one who was not lost. In the coming kingdom, be not mindful of those things which foster your anxiety, but rather at times concern yourself only with the doing of the Father's will who is in heaven. And I want to make a point here real quick about this, and that is the fact that when you accept God in your life and you accept Jesus as your Lord, your creator son, all these things. When you have done this, you are already in the kingdom. You are already become children of God at that moment of decision. So there is no process you have to go through other than deciding that you are part of the kingdom of God. Okay, it's just that simple. Okay, so just like these men requested to be part of something, they didn't realize they had already through their decisions became part of something. Does that make sense?
Yes.
All right, let's go on. Diane.
James and John received the rebuke and good grace. Nevermore were they envious of Andrew and Simon, and they made ready with their two associate apostles to depart for Galilee and the next morning. From the day on the term From this day on, the term apostle was employed to distinguish the chosen family of Jesus' advisors from the vast multitude of believing disciples who subsequently followed him.
Can I interject something?
Yes, go ahead.
This phrase, from this day on, the term apostle was employed to distinguish the chosen family of Jesus' advisors from the vast multitude of believing disciples who subsequently followed him. Now, Paul was not among this group, was he?
No, he was not.
How can he be an apostle?
He's
He was a
self-appointed.
self-appointed apostle. Now, I had this discussion back in 2013 or 14. I don't remember which one it was when I taught this class back then. And that is the fact that there are two types of believers in Jesus. There's disciples and apostles. And anyone who has dedicated their life to the spreading of the gospel of Jesus is already an apostle. Okay. The difference between a disciple, though, and an apostle has decided to dedicate his whole life to spreading the gospel of Jesus. Okay. That's the big difference. A disciple is someone who believes in Jesus and believes in the doctrines of Jesus, but doesn't live their daily life teaching and preaching and doing those things which brings other men into the discipleship.
So a minister of Jesus would be considered an apostle.
An apostle. That's right. That's right.
Roger.
And yeah, go ahead, Rodney.
Well, the way I look at it, any student who studies Jesus' teaching is a disciple.
Right.
Disciple is another word for student.
Follower. Yeah, student.
Whereas an apostle, Jesus actually ordained 12 disciples.
He did.
He ordained them. So they became an apostle. And Paul, he was never ordained.
No, he was not. I don't know if he was ordained from the 12, to be honest. Okay. But he is a self-appointed apostle in the fact that he had dedicated his life to spreading the gospel of Jesus. Okay. So you can you can call him an apostle, just like I could call myself an apostle. And many ministers in churches call themselves apostles. Like the guy that married my wife and I called himself apostle. So, which is proper because they have dedicated their life to teaching the words of Jesus throughout the world. The big difference is the dedication in what you're doing. When I dedicated my life to Jesus years ago, even before the Urantia book, I felt comfortable calling myself an apostle of Jesus because I dedicated my life to doing that above all else. Okay. So that's the big difference. Being a disciple is easy. You can follow someone's teachings, you can become a student of someone, and in that case, you're automatically a disciple of those people, but you will not go as far as dedicating everything in your life to Jesus, and that's what we have done as teachers and as apostles of Jesus, really.
I actually looked up the definition a while back because I had another discussion with another group. And I was always thought the apostle was of the original 12. And, like I have a, consistent problem with Paul.
Yeah.
And so the definition corresponds with what Roger's saying, an official of the church.
Yeah. Well,
Okay.
it doesn't have to
But,
be an official. It's just someone who's dedicated their life to doing that above all else. Right.
okay, but my observation, excuse me, is the fact that I'm thinking of apostle, I'm thinking of the original apostles.
Mm-hmm.
To me, they're a group apart of anybody subsequent.
That's what I believe.
Well, yeah, you can think that, and that's not incorrect. But even Gary, even the apostles themselves, I believe it was three of the original or three of the apostles ended up falling away from the group shortly after Jesus' death. And it wasn't because they didn't believe, it's because they didn't have the capacity to go on as teachers of the gospel. Okay, some people, there's two kinds of people in the world. Some people are comfortable and qualified to do that, and some people are just not. I mean, they're just not, they don't have the talent for it, they don't have the insight to teach and that sort of thing. And that's okay. We're all different, but some of them do. So you can't kind of limit the apostleship to just the 11. That would be saying like there's nobody else going to come along and be as faithful and spend all this time that they need to teach Jesus's word. And there's many, many people out there, even today, that I would consider apostles. I really do.
I just,
Many in the Urantia organization.
in my mind, I consider the original 12 because they was with Jesus and he designated.
Yeah.
And I do recognize that what you're saying,
Yeah.
but to me, the original 12 are special.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Okay.
Because they were there with Jesus.
Yes. End of lecture.
And we accept your lecture 100%. Okay, let's go on.
It's mine.
It's yours? Okay.
And I would like to point out, as I was growing up, we were always taught they were the 12 disciples.
Yeah.
And in fact, most Christians are taught that it's the 12 disciples.
Yeah. And that's not a good term for the 12. It's really not. Think of it this way. Those who follow John the Baptist, he called his followers disciples. Okay.
Students.
Because they were students. And even John did not consider them apostles. Only those who followed Jesus were considered apostles. Right. So okay.
I think we read this one.
We read this one? Oh, okay.
Pretty sure.
Right. No, wait a second. Go back. I can check
Okay.
it. I just read that one paragraph, that one last sentence. No, we haven't.
Okay.
Okay.
James and John received the rebuke in good grace. Nevermore were they envious of Andrew and Peter. And they made ready.
Okay.
Yes,
you messed me up there when you said
yes,
Peter.
We did. Somehow
Simon.
that was the previous one. I think we went back to. So Rodney's right.
Okay, we've already read this then. Okay, I'll move forward. All right, go ahead, Rodney.
Okay. Late that evening, James, John, Andrew, and Simon held converse with John the Baptist, and with tearful eye but steady voice, the stalwart Judean prophet surrendered two of his leading disciples to become the apostles of the Galilean prince of the coming kingdom.
See what they said there? The two leading disciples to become the apostles. You see that? Okay. All right.
Mhm.
All right. Pam, would you take the next one?
Choosing Philip and Nathanael. Sunday morning, February 24th, AD 26, Jesus took leave of John the Baptist by the river near Pella, never again to see him in the flesh.
Isn't this interesting that you think about it? Within 3 days, all six of the first apostles will have been chosen, right?
Yeah.
All right.
Hmm.
Letch, would you take the next one?
Yeah. That day, as Jesus and his 4 disciple apostles departed for Galilee, there was a great tumult in the camp of John's followers. The first great division was about to take place. The day before, John had made his positive pronouncement to Andrew and Ezra that Jesus was the deliverer. Andrew decided to follow Jesus, but Ezra rejected the mild-mannered carpenter of Nazareth, proclaiming to his associates, "The prophet Daniel declares that the Son of Man will come with the clouds of heaven in power and great glory." This Galilean carpenter, this Capernaum boat builder, cannot be the deliverer. Can such a gift of God come out of Nazareth? This Jesus is a relative of John, and through much kindness of heart has our teacher been deceived. Let us remain aloof from this false Messiah. When John rebuked Ezra for these utterances, he drew away with many disciples and hastened south, and this group continued to baptize in John's name and eventually founded a sect of those who believed in John but refused to accept Jesus. A remnant of this group persists in Mesopotamia even to this day.
Wow.
Isn't
I
that?
wonder who they are.
I don't know,
Yeah,
but that's kind of interesting, isn't it? Even well, at least to the day of writing this book, they were still, a group, John's followers. All right.
And Roger,
Yeah.
you made the comment that it's interesting within 3 days he chose his first 6.
Right.
Well, 5 of those he already knew. In fact,
Yes.
he knew Philip vaguely, but Andrew and Simon, James and John, he knew Peter, Simon, well enough to call him Peter.
Yeah. Hmm. All of them knew him in Capernaum when he was the boat builder, right?
Yeah.
So, which is kind of interesting. All right. Gary, would you take the next one?
When this trouble was brewing among John's followers, Jesus and his 4 disciple apostles were well on their way toward Galilee. Before they crossed the Jordan to go by way to Nain,
Dane, that's correct.
to Nazareth, Jesus, looking ahead and up the road, saw one Philip of Bethsaida,
Bethsaida. Bethsaida.
Bethsaida,
Yep.
with a friend coming toward them. Jesus had known Philip of aforetime, and he was also well known to all 4 of the new apostles. He was on his way with his friend Nathanael to visit John at Pella to learn more about the reported coming of the kingdom of God. And he was delighted to greet Jesus. Philip had been an admirer of Jesus ever since he first came to Capernaum. But Nathanael, who lived at Cana of Galilee, did not know Jesus. Philip went forward to greet his friends, while Nathanael rested under the shade of a tree by the roadside. See,
All
just
right.
to be honest with you, when I was reading this many years ago, I tried to see what apostle I was most likely to be
Yeah.
like.
Uh-huh.
I kind of, as it may come out later, Nathaniel, because I can see me resting under a shade tree after
Yeah.
a long walk when somebody went up.
Okay, we'll call you Gary the Lazy. No, I'm joking.
Gary out of breath or whatever.
Gary out of breath. You call me that most of the time. All right. Peter took Philip to one side and proceeded to explain that they, referring to himself, Andrew, James, and John, had all become associates of Jesus in the new kingdom, and strongly urged Philip to volunteer for service. Philip was in a quandary. What should he do here? Without a moment's warning, on the roadside near the Jordan, there had come up for immediate decision the most momentous question of a lifetime. That's the way things happen to all of us, isn't it?
Yeah.
By this time, he was in an earnest converse with Peter, Andrew, and John, while Jesus was outlining to James the trip through Galilee and on to Capernaum. Finally, Andrew suggested to Philip, why not ask the teacher? All right.
It suddenly dawned on Philip that Jesus was a really great man, possibly the Messiah, and he decided to abide by Jesus' decision in this matter. And he went straight to him, asking, Teacher, shall I go down to John, or shall I join my friends who follow you? And Jesus answered, Follow me. Philip was thrilled with the assurance that he had found the deliverer.
You're on mute.
Sorry. And this is what Rodney was talking about earlier when he said we were talking about follow me, right? So basically it's,
Well, and Jesus knew too that John wouldn't be around much longer.
yeah, that's true. He could foresee the end coming, right? All right. Rodney, would you take the next one?
Philip now motioned to the group to remain where they were while he hurried back to break the news of his decision to his friend Nathaniel, who still tarried behind under the mulberry tree, turning over in his mind the many things which he had heard concerning John the Baptist, the coming kingdom, and the expected Messiah. Philip broke in upon these meditations, exclaiming, I have found the deliverer, him of whom Moses and the prophets wrote, and whom John has proclaimed. Nathanael, looking up, inquired, Whence comes this teacher? And Philip replied, He is Jesus of Nazareth, the son of Joseph, the carpenter, more recently residing at Capernaum. And then, somewhat shocked, Nathanael asked, Can any such good thing come out of Nazareth? But Philip, taking him by the arm, said, Come and see.
Right. And that's repeated many times throughout this book, right? Can any good thing come out of Nazareth? All right. Pam, would you take the next one?
Philip led Nathanael to Jesus, who, looking benignly into the face of a sincere doubter, said, Behold, a genuine Israelite, in whom there is no deceit. Follow me. And Nathanael, turning to Philip, said, You are right. He is indeed a master of men. I will also follow if I am worthy. And Jesus nodded to Nathanael, saying, Follow me.
Okay, and it's kind of funny because Jesus complimented him first, didn't he?
Yeah.
And knew his ego would take over, of course, and then he decided to follow him, right? When Jesus gave him the compliment.
There I go again.
Yeah. All right, Letch, would you take the next one, please?
Yes. And Jesus had now Jesus had now assembled one half of his future core of intimate associates, 5 who had for some time known him, and 1 stranger, Nathanael. Without further delay, they crossed the Jordan and, going by the village of Nain, reached Nazareth late that evening.
Now, something that's going to come up a little later in this, y'all, is it's also very interesting that Jesus chose exactly 12 apostles, didn't he? Okay, not 13, not 14, not 15, but 12. Okay.
He actually chose 6.
He actually chose 6. That's right. And then those 6 chose the other 6. Right.
To multiply.
That's right.
1 for each month.
Yeah. All right. Gary, would you take the next?
They all remained overnight with Joseph in Jesus' boyhood town. The associates of Jesus little understood why their newfound teacher was so concerned with the completely destroying every vestige of his writings, which remained about the home in the form of 10 Commandments and other mottos and sayings. But this proceeding, this proceeding, together with the fact that they never saw him subsequently write, except upon the dust or in the sand, made a deep impression upon their minds.
And this is probably why the Gospels did not get written anywhere close to during the life of Jesus, right?
That's right.
Because they knew how Jesus felt about leaving writing of any type around, because he didn't want it idolized. Okay,
I would like to know the commandments that he had written in the home and the mottos.
I think at one point in the book it actually goes through them, if I remember correctly, and I think 7 of them were the result of the 7 commandments of Melchizedek put down. Okay. And then the 10 actually came from an expanded version by Moses. Okay. So more than likely, the 10 commandments that he wrote down were the ones from the Torah, which would be Moses's 10 commandments, you would think.
And he probably wrote down his birthday text.
Yeah, he probably did too. Yeah, probably did too.
What was that? You've lost me. You
It
remember
was
the
Psalms.
lazy one.
It was the Psalms, his birthday
Well,
text.
a Jewish student would choose a text
Yeah.
that helped guide him.
Yeah.
It was his motto.
All right. And another thing I want to point out before we get off this paragraph, it says overnight in Jesus's boyhood home. Joseph, it was Jesus's one of his brothers, right? Not Joseph, his father. I want to make sure that that's clear.
Yeah.
Okay.
Mm-hmm.
All right. So it's one of his brothers who took over the home, which we studied in that earlier
Oh, yes.
thing. Okay. All right. Who's back up? I think I'm back up again. Am I not?
Yes.
All right. 3, the visit to Capernaum. The next day, Jesus sent his apostles on to Cana. Since all of them were invited to the wedding of a prominent young woman of that town, while he prepared to pay a hurried visit to his mother at Capernaum, stopping at Magdala to see his brother Jude. His brother Jude took up fishing down there, right? All right.
Before leaving Nazareth, the new associates of Jesus told Joseph and other members of Jesus' family about the wonderful events of the then recent past and gave free expression to their belief that Jesus was the long expected deliverer. And these members of Jesus' family talked all this over, and Joseph said, maybe after all, Mother was right. Maybe our strange brother is the coming king.
Kind of interesting, isn't it? Suddenly, after all these years, he's coming out. Okay. Rodney, would you take the next one?
Yes. Jude was present at Jesus' baptism, and with his brother James, had become a firm believer in Jesus' mission on earth. Although both James and Jude were much perplexed as to the nature of their brother's mission, their mother had resurrected all her early hopes of Jesus as the Messiah, the Son of David, and she encouraged her sons to have faith in their brother as the deliverer of Israel.
And interesting that they're going to have their hopes dashed, isn't it? Because Jesus downright states that he is not the Messiah they expect, right, from the Jewish text. All right. Pam, would you take the next one?
Jesus arrived in Capernaum Monday night, but he did not go to his own home, where lived James and his mother. He went directly to the home of Zebedee. All his friends at Capernaum saw a great and pleasant change in him. Once more, he seemed to be comparatively cheerful and more like himself as he was during the earlier years at Nazareth. For years previous to his baptism and the isolation periods just before and just after, he had grown increasingly serious and self-contained. Now he seemed quite like his old self to all of them. There was about him something of majestic import and exalted aspect, but he was once again lightened and joyful.
Lighthearted and joyful.
Yeah.
So he's happy again, right? That's what they're saying. All right, Letch, would you take the next one, please?
Okay. Mary was thrilled with expectation. She anticipated that the promise of Gabriel was nearing fulfillment. She expected all Palestine soon to be startled and stunned by the miraculous revelation of her son as the supernatural king of the Jews. But to all of the many questions which his mother, James, Jude, and Zebedee asked, Jesus only smilingly replied, "It is better that I tarry here for a while. I must do the will of my Father who is in heaven."
And we know that part of that will was his waiting around for the end of John, right? Too. We got to remember that. All right, Gary, would you take the next?
You're muted.
Gary, you're muted.
It was nice and quiet, wasn't it?
Hmm.
On the next day, Tuesday, they all journeyed over to Cana for the wedding of.
Naomi.
Why don't they just have regular names like Mary, Beth, and Jane?
Because
Whatever.
then they wouldn't be able to confuse you if they did.
I know this book is meant to torment me, which was to take place.
Gary, let me tell you a little story. I gave my mother my copy of my own book, Who Is God? And I go over every day, she's 90, she's going to be 91. I go over every day to make lunch for her and everything, check on her and all that. But anyway, the book was open on her sofa, and it's been open, I think, on the same couple pages for about a week. And my sister went over because day before yesterday, because I had to go into the hospital for a day. And she said, Mom's reading your book. And I said, yeah, I saw it sitting there. And she says, I don't think she understands anything. I said, well, Karen, it's not an easy book to read. So we can relate to your problem here.
Yeah.
When I tell somebody about the book, I will suggest that they read the Jesus papers first,
Definitely.
for the simple reason that if you start out at the beginning, I've had one friend tell me, he says, I've tried, I can't understand it. It's beyond
Yeah.
me. And what the funny part about it, this guy at one time thought he was the smartest man in the room all the time.
Uh-huh.
And years later, he says, I'm stupid.
Well, at
It is
least
a
he was still, embracing it and looking at it.
yeah, but
No,
it is
he,
a humbling book, isn't it? I mean, it really is, and well, with my book, even, people that have looked at it and read it and that sort of thing say, your book is not as easy as you think. I mean, you make things simple, but it's not as easy to read as you think it is. So,
no, it's not. It's
yeah,
uh,
yeah,
it's one of these books you read a section and you shut up and think
yeah.
and let it die. Just not a fast read at all. Okay.
Yeah, well, you can see the
Not a
base.
fast read.
No, it's not. The base it came from was not an easy read either. So, you got to look at the sources, right?
Well,
And
you've got to remember one thing. You are probably the most versed person I know in the book.
yeah,
Okay. And I know other people who think they're intelligent, who've been reading it just as long as you.
yeah,
You have far exceeded their understanding.
yeah.
I'm in their class and I'm not in your class. Okay.
Well, it's just study. Anybody can get to where I am if you study long enough. That's the only difference. It just takes time.
Kind of
And the
like,
average person sometimes doesn't have that much time in their lives to dedicate to. Plus, you got to remember I'm dedicated to be an apostle, not a disciple. So it makes a difference, right?
Mm-hmm.
It really does. All right, go on, Gary. Sorry I interrupted you.
that's my fault. On the next day, Tuesday, they all journeyed over to Cana for the wedding of Naomi, which was to take place on the following day. And in spite of Jesus' repeated warnings that they tell no man about him until the Father's hour shall come, they insisted on quietly spreading the news abroad that they had found the deliverer. They each confidently expected that Jesus would inaugurate his assumption of mess, mess, ah, I can say
Messianic.
it. I know what it is. I can't say it. Whatever. Authority at the forthcoming wedding at Cana, and that they would do so and that he would do so with great power and sublime grandeur. They remembered what had been told them about the phenomena attendant upon his baptism, and they believed that his future course on earth would be marked by the increasing manifestations of supernatural wonders and miraculous demonstrations. Accordingly, the entire countryside was preparing to gather together at Cana for the wedding feast of Naomi and Joab, the son of Nathan.
All right. So they were all expecting something at the wedding, right? Expecting Jesus to make some great thing happen.
Yeah.
Mary had not been so joyous in years. She journeyed to Cana in the spirit of the Queen Mother on the way to witness the coronation of her son. Not since he was 13 years old had Jesus' family and friends seen him so carefree and happy, so thoughtful and understanding of the wishes and desires of his associates, so touchingly sympathetic. And so they all whispered among themselves in small groups, wondering what was going to happen. What would this strange person do next? How would he usher the glory of the coming kingdom? And they were all thrilled with the thought that they were to be present to see the revelation that might and power of Israel's God. So they were all expecting something miraculous, right? Right. 650.
This explains the logic or attitude or why Mary would come to Jesus and, for God's sakes, do something. Give us some wine.
Yeah. Yeah.
4. The wedding at Cana. By noon on Wednesday, almost 1,000 guests had arrived in Cana, more than 4 times the number bidden to the wedding feast. It was a Jewish custom to celebrate weddings on Wednesday, and the invitations had been sent abroad for the wedding 1 month previously. In the forenoon and early afternoon, it appeared more like a public reception for Jesus than a wedding. Everybody wanted to greet this new famous Galilean, and he was most cordial to all, young and old, Jew and Gentile. And everybody rejoiced when Jesus consented to lead the preliminary wedding procession.
Hmm.
So it was like the coming of a superstar, wouldn't it?
Hmm.
Here's a picture of such. Another one. And this is the type of vessel they would have kept the wine in during that period of time.
Hmm.
That's why they ran out of wine. It was too small.
That's right. These are all pictures of the wedding and the miracle of the wine. This is a actual wine company that's still there in Cana because of the wedding feast. So,
You're kidding.
no,
Wonder
you
how
see the
they
wedding
say
church here? See that?
the
All right.
Cana
So,
Catholic Wedding Chapel.
yeah,
I bet you it costs a fortune to get married there.
I bet it does too. Y'all can look at those online and either in the slides or on the website, Fifth Epochal Revelation Fellowship. Now, y'all remember to, if anybody asks you, the Atlanta Urantia Study Group is going to be shut down tomorrow. Okay. So there will just be one site, one website there instead of 2 duplicates. It'll just be the Fifth Epochal Revelation Fellowship. All right. So we shut down the Atlanta Urantia one. All right. So if you go out there looking for something, it's just going to say, can't find it anymore. So, all right.
Hey, Jesus was now thoroughly self-conscious regarding his human existence, his divine pre-existence, and the status of his combined or fused human and divine natures. With perfect poise, he could at one moment enact the human role or immediately assume the personality prerogatives of the divine nature.
So he could control both the human aspect of himself and the divine aspect of himself, both.
Interesting.
Which makes him the first split personality person that we've known of.
Yeah.
That's right. Pam, would you take the next one, please?
Yeah. As the day wore on, Jesus became increasingly conscious that the people were expecting him to perform some wonder. More especially, he recognized that his family and his 6 disciple apostles were looking for him appropriately to announce his forthcoming kingdom by some startling and supernatural manifestation.
Right. So everybody was expecting it, right? Something coming. Letch, would you take the next one, please?
Yeah. Early in the afternoon, Mary summoned James, and together they made bold to approach Jesus to inquire if he would admit them to his confidence to the extent of informing them at what hour and at what point, in connection with the wedding ceremonies, he had planned to manifest himself as the supernatural one. No sooner had they spoken of these matters to Jesus than they saw they had aroused his characteristic indignation. He said only, "If you love me, then be willing to tarry with me while I wait upon the will of my Father who is in heaven." But the eloquence of his rebuke lay in the expression of his face.
It's almost like, how dare you tell me, Right. Gary, would you take this?
Okay. This move of his mother was a a great disappointment to the human Jesus, and he was much sobered by his and he was much sobered by his reaction to her suggestive proposal that he permitted himself to indulge in some outward demonstration of his divinity. That was one of the very things he had decided not to do when so recently isolated in the hills. For several hours, Mary was much depressed. She said to James, "I cannot understand him. What can it all mean? This Is there no end to his strange conduct?" James and Jude tried to comfort their mother, while Jesus withdrew for an hour's solitude. But he returned to the gathering, was once more lighthearted and joyous.
Okay. Unfortunately, we're out of time.
Okay.
So next time, we'll continue on with this, with the miracle, right? And so that'll give us something to look forward to on Tuesday. All right. So we will take it up right here on 4/6 on Tuesday. And so let's go to the share and share our prayer out here. All right. Prayer of acceptance. Okay. And Pam, would you like to do our prayer of acceptance tonight?
Yeah, prayer of acceptance. I believe that God is my paradise Father, and that only by faith am I saved. No sacrifice is necessary. By this same faith, I became a child of God, and know that all men and women are my brothers and sisters. We know the Son of God, the sovereign of our universe of Nebadon, as Christ Michael, Jesus of Nazareth. By allowing the will of God to become my will, I will someday stand in the presence of the Paradise Father. In the name of Christ Michael, Jesus of Nazareth. Amen.
Amen. And thanks
Amen.
all of y'all for coming tonight. And thank you all at home who's watching us or will watch us later. Please come see us again. And love you guys. And I will see you on Tuesday. Right?
Very
Thank
good.
you.
Thank you.
Thank you,
You're
Rachel.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Y'all have a good
Love you
weekend.
guys.
You
You
too.
too.
Albeit